The desert wind howled through the soundstage lot, but it was the silence of the crew that signaled his arrival. John Wayne didn't walk. He rolled, a slow, deliberate stride that parted the sea of grips and extras like Moses at the Red Sea. His thumbs were hooked casually into his gun belt, his Stetson pulled low against the morning glare. He didn't say a word to the men who stepped aside. He didn't have to. The cold, flinty look in his eyes said enough. The Duke was going hunting, and the prey was sitting in the producer's chair. But that was the morning after. Let's go back a few hours, to the moment the fuse was lit. It started, as most trouble does, with a woman's tears. The sun hadn't cleared the mesa yet when Wayne ducked under the canvas flap of the coffee tent. The air smelled of burnt grounds and dust, and a kerosene lamp threw long, jittery shadows across the plywood tables. Wayne liked this hour. The crew was still asleep, the desert was quiet, and a man could drink his coffee without someone shoving a script revision under his nose. He poured himself a cup, black, no sugar, the way God intended, and was about to settle onto a crate when he heard it. A small, choked sound. The kind of sound someone makes when they're trying very hard not to be heard. He turned his head slowly. She was sitting in the far corner, behind a rack of cavalry uniforms, her knees drawn up to her chest. Sarah Miller, 23 years old, freckles across the bridge of her nose, hands that were always busy with a needle and thread. She did costume repair for the production, and she was good at it. Wayne had noticed her work. The stitching on his leather vest was some of the finest he'd seen. He'd told her so once, and she'd blushed the color of a desert sunset. Now her eyes were red, and her cheeks were wet, and she was biting down on her knuckle to keep the sobs from coming out. Wayne stood there for a moment, holding his tin cup. He wasn't good with crying women. Never had been. On screen, he could sweep a lady into his arms and deliver a line that made the audience sigh. In real life, he felt about as useful as a screen door on a submarine. But he wasn't the kind of man who walked away from distress. He crossed the tent slowly, his boots creaking on the packed earth, and lowered himself onto the crate across from her. He didn't crowd her. He just sat, took a sip of his coffee, and waited. After a moment, she looked up. Her eyes went wide. The way people's eyes always went wide when they realized they were sitting 3 feet from John Wayne at 6 in the morning. Mr. Wayne, I'm sorry, I didn't. Well, sister, he said, his voice low and unhurried. What's clouding up your morning? She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. It's nothing. I'm being foolish. Wayne took another sip. Doesn't look like nothing to me. The story came out in fragments, the way painful stories always do. Her father, Tommy Iron Miller, had been a stunt rider for 20 years. One of the best in the business. He doubled for Wayne himself in 3 pictures, rode horses off cliffs, tumbled through breakaway saloon walls, took falls that would have killed a lesser man. 2 years ago, on this very production company's last picture, a pyrotechnic charge had gone off early during a cavalry charge scene. Tommy had seen a cluster of extras, kids, really, 19 and 20 years old, standing too close to the blast zone. He'd spurred his horse between them and the explosion. The extras walked away without a scratch. Tommy's left leg was shattered in 4 places. The doctors saved it, but it would never bend right again. He walked with a heavy limp now. Couldn't ride. Couldn't fall. But he could still rig saddles, check harnesses, and teach younger men how to take a tumble without breaking their necks. The production had kept him on as a safety consultant, a desk job, mostly, but it paid, and it covered his medical bills. Until last night. Mr. Vance called him into the office trailer after wrap, Sarah said, her voice trembling. Said the budget was too tight. Said Daddy was redundant overhead. He fired him on the spot, Mr. Wayne. Didn't even let him finish the week. Security walked him to his car like he was a criminal. 20 years. 20 years, and they walked him out like a thief. She pressed her fist against her mouth. And his medical? Wayne asked quietly. Gone. All of it. Mr. Vance said the studio's insurance obligation ended with employment. Daddy's got 3 more surgeries scheduled. The bone graft alone costs. She couldn't finish. Wayne didn't move. His face was perfectly still, like something carved from the red rock of Monument Valley. But if you'd looked closely, and Sarah was too upset to look closely, you'd have seen a small muscle in his jaw tighten. You'd have seen his fingers grip the tin cup just a fraction harder, until the metal dimpled under his thumb. He sat there for a long time. Then he drained the last of his coffee, set the cup down on the crate with a sound like a gavel, and stood up. All 6 feet 4 inches of him, unfolding like a thunderhead rising over the plains. "You go wash your face, sister," he said. "And you tell your daddy to sit tight." "Mr. Wayne, what are you going to?" But he was already walking out of the tent, and John Wayne, once he started walking towards something, did not stop. The production office was a double-wide trailer parked at the edge of the lot, its aluminum sides already baking in the early sun. A window unit air conditioner rattled and dripped. Through the thin walls, Wayne could hear a voice, loud, nasal, pleased with itself. Arthur Vance. Wayne had met his type before. New York money men who came west with their sharp suits and sharper spreadsheets, who looked at a movie set and saw nothing but a ledger. Vance was 45, slick-haired, with manicured nails and a gold pinky ring that caught the light every time he gestured, which was often because Arthur Vance loved the sound of his own voice the way a rooster loves the dawn. Wayne could hear him through the door now, on the telephone, laughing. Trimmed another 4,000 off the below the line. "Yeah, the cripple. What's he gonna do, hop after me?" "Listen, Dave, by the time I'm done tightening this ship, we'll come in 15% under budget, and you and I both know what that means for our back end." Wayne's hand closed around the door handle. He didn't knock. John Wayne never knocked when a man had earned himself a visit. The door swung open, not kicked, not slammed, just opened with the kind of slow, heavy authority that made the flimsy trailer shudder on its blocks. Sunlight flooded in behind Wayne, turning him into a black silhouette framed in the doorway, his hat nearly brushing the top of the frame. Vance looked up from behind his rented mahogany desk. The phone was still pressed to his ear. His mouth was still open mid-laugh. The laugh died like a campfire in a rainstorm. "I'll call you back," Vance said into the phone, and hung up. Wayne stepped inside. The trailer seemed to shrink around him. He didn't sit. He stood in front of the desk, feet planted shoulder-width apart, arms at his sides, and he looked down at Arthur Vance with an expression that had made braver men than Vance reconsider their life choices. "Mr. Wayne," Vance said, recovering fast. He was, after all, a man who made his living with words. He spread his hands and put on his best studio smile. "What can I do for you? If this is about the reshoot schedule, I've already spoken to Elias and—" "Tommy Miller," Wayne said. 2 words, dropped into the air-conditioned silence like stones into a well. Vance's smile flickered. Yes, the stunt consultant. Look, Duke, can I call you Duke?" "No." Vance blinked. "Right, Mr. Wayne. Look, these budget decisions are never easy. But the studio has given me very clear parameters, and frankly, Mr. Miller's position was a luxury we couldn't." "You listen to me, Pilgrim." Wayne's voice didn't rise. If anything, it got quieter, which was worse. He leaned forward, placing both hands flat on the edge of Vance's desk. His massive frame blocked out the light from the window behind Vance, casting a long, dark shadow over the producer, over his papers, over his gold-plated desk pen, and his half-eaten Danish. "That man you threw out like yesterday's garbage broke his body making pictures for this studio. He can't ride, he can't fall, and he walks with a limp that'll follow him to his grave. And he got every bit of that saving lives on a set you were supposed to make safe." Vance's jaw tightened. "With all due respect, Mr. Wayne, that accident was investigated and the studio was cleared of—" "I'm not finished." Vance shut his mouth. Wayne straightened up to his full height. "You're going to pick up that telephone. You're going to call whoever you need to call. And you're going to put Tommy Miller back on this crew by noon today, with full pay, full medical, and a written apology. Are we clear?" For a moment, just a moment, Vance looked like he might comply. The physical reality of John Wayne looming over him in a confined space had a clarifying effect on the mind. But then something hardened behind his eyes. The money man's pride. "Mr. Wayne, I understand your sentiment. Tommy's a popular fellow. But I have a fiduciary responsibility to this production, and I will not be intimidated into." Wayne reached down and picked up the lit cigar from Vance's crystal ashtray. He held it between his thumb and forefinger, the ember glowing orange, and without breaking eye contact, he ground it out slowly on the surface of Vance's pristine mahogany desk. The wood hissed. A thin ribbon of smoke curled upward. Vance stared at the black burn mark on his desk. "By noon," Wayne said. He turned and walked toward the door. His hand was on the handle when Vance spoke again, his voice brittle. Fine, fine, I'll make some calls. You'll have your cripple back. Wayne stopped. He didn't turn around. His shoulders rose once, a deep breath drawn through the nose of a man exercising great restraint. His name, Wayne said, still facing the door, is Tommy Miller. And if I hear you call him that again, Pilgrim, I won't be using your cigar next time. I'll be using you. He walked out. But something nagged at him as he stepped back into the desert sun. Something he'd seen on Vance's desk, just a flash, half hidden under a pile of call sheets. A pink carbon copy of a purchase order. The supplier's name had been smudged, but Wayne had caught two words: Consolidated Pyrotechnics. He'd been in this business for 30 years. He knew every reputable special effects supplier west of the Mississippi. He'd never heard of Consolidated Pyrotechnics. And that bothered him. The horse barn sat 200 yards from the main lot, a long, low structure of weathered timber that smelled of hay, leather, and honest sweat. It was Wayne's favorite place on any set. Horses didn't lie. Horses didn't cheat on their contracts. Horses didn't fire injured men to fatten their bonuses. He found Shorty Jenkins inside, bent over a saddle, working saddle soap into the leather with his bare hands. Shorty was built like a fire hydrant, 5'5", 200 pounds, with forearms like bridge cables and a face that looked like it had been assembled in a hurry from leftover parts. He'd been a prop man and wrangler for as long as Wayne had been making pictures. They'd shared canteens in the Utah canyons, shared flasks in the Arizona nights, and shared a bond that neither man would ever be sentimental enough to name. Shorty. Duke. Wayne settled onto a hay bale and pulled out a cigarette. He didn't light it right away. He just held it between his fingers and turned it slowly, the way he did when he was thinking. Tell me about the pyrotechnics on this picture. Shorty's hands stopped moving on the saddle. He didn't look up. What do you want to know? I want to know why I saw a purchase order from an outfit called Consolidated Pyrotechnics on Vance's desk. Shorty was quiet for a long time. The only sound was a horse shifting its weight in a nearby stall, the creak of old wood. When Shorty finally spoke, his voice was low and careful. Because Vance canceled our contract with Holloway Effects 6 weeks ago. Holloway's been doing our pyro for 12 years. Good stuff, reliable, tested. Vance said they were too expensive. Brought in this Consolidated outfit instead. Nobody's heard of them. I looked into it a little. They're a shell company registered to a P.O. box in Barstow. Near as I can tell, they're buying surplus military ordnance. Unstable stuff. Duke, the kind of junk the Army throws away because it's too unpredictable for a battlefield, and reselling it at a markup that still comes in cheaper than Holloway. Wayne lit his cigarette. Drew deep. Let the smoke out slow. And the difference between Holloway's price and Consolidated's price, he said. Where does that go? Shorty finally looked up. His eyes were hard. Where do you think? It goes into Vance's pocket. He bills the studio for Holloway-level expenses, pays Consolidated half that, and keeps the change. I've seen him do it with the horse blankets, the breakaway furniture, the blank cartridges. Everything on this set that's supposed to be safe is about 2 steps from falling apart. Wayne stared at the ember of his cigarette. Tommy's accident, he said. It wasn't a question. Shorty nodded slowly. The charge that blew Tommy's leg, it wasn't supposed to go off for another 8 seconds. Holloway stuff has precision timers, military spec. That Consolidated garbage has timers made from clock parts and wishful thinking. I told the effects supervisor. He told Vance. Vance told him to shut up and shoot the scene. Wayne sat very still. The cigarette burned down between his fingers, forgotten, the ash growing long and gray. A horse nickered softly. Somewhere outside, a grip shouted about a missing C-stand. There's a big sequence this afternoon, Shorty continued, his voice dropping even lower. Billy Ray's supposed to ride through the canyon pass, while charges blow on both sides. 12 charges total. Every single one of them is Consolidated. Wayne crushed the cigarette under his boot heel. Who's checking the rigs? Nobody. Vance fired Tommy, remember? Tommy was the only one who inspected every charge before a shoot. The effects boys are green, they don't know what to look for. And the new supervisor is Vance's man. He signs off on whatever Vance tells him to sign off on. Wayne stood up. He put his hand on Shorty's shoulder, a brief, heavy touch. You still got one of those Consolidated charges? An unused one. Shorty hesitated. Then he reached under his workbench and pulled out a metal box, about the size of a cigar case. Inside, nestled in straw packing, was a cylindrical device with wires trailing from one end. "Lifted it yesterday," Shorty said. "Figured somebody ought to have evidence." Wayne took the box. He looked at it for a long moment. "Much obliged, Shorty." "Duke." "Yeah. Be careful with that. The detonator's got a hair trigger. A hard bump could set it off." Wayne tucked the box under his arm with the casual ease of a man who'd been handling dangerous things, real and theatrical, for 3 decades. "That," he said, "is exactly what I'm counting on." The afternoon sun had turned the canyon location into a furnace. Heat shimmered off the red rock walls, and the crew moved through it like men walking underwater, slow, squinting, miserable. Wardrobe had soaked bandanas in ice water for the principals, but the stunt crew got nothing but lukewarm canteen water and Vance's impatient glare from his director's chair, which, Wayne noted with grim amusement, was positioned safely behind a concrete blast barrier. Funny that a man who trusted his own pyrotechnics wouldn't need a blast barrier. Director Elias Thorne was setting up the shot. Elias was a tall, thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and a perpetual look of worried apology, like a substitute teacher who'd accidentally wandered into a prison yard. He was a fine director, sensitive with actors, meticulous with composition, but he had the backbone of a wet noodle when it came to standing up to the money men. Wayne liked him. Wayne also wanted to shake him until his teeth rattled. "Elias," Wayne said, catching the director by the elbow as he moved between cameras. "Duke. Good. Good. We're almost set for your close-up after the stunt sequence. If you could just hold the shoot." Elias blinked behind his glasses. "I'm sorry. Don't roll on the stunt. Not today. Duke, I can't. Mr. Vance has been very clear. We're already 2 days behind schedule, and if we don't get this sequence in the can by sundown." "Elias." Wayne's voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of a man who had been making pictures since before Elias could tie his own shoes. "Those charges are bad. They're cheap, unstable, and rigged by men who don't know a squib from a stick of dynamite. If Billy Ray rides through that canyon, you might be pulling what's left of him out with a shovel." The color drained from Elias's face. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Duke, I've heard the rumors, but Mr. Vance assured me that all the pyrotechnics were." "Vance is a liar and a thief, and if you roll that camera, you'll be his accomplice." The words hung in the hot air between them. Elias looked like a man standing at the edge of a cliff, trying to decide whether the wind was strong enough to catch him. Before he could answer, Vance appeared at his shoulder, freshly pressed despite the heat, his gold pinky ring flashing. "Gentlemen, are we ready? Lights burning, Elias. Let's get this show on the road." "Mr. Vance," Elias began weakly, "Mr. Wayne has raised some concerns about the pyrotechnic." "Oh, for Christ's sake." Vance turned to Wayne with a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Duke, I appreciate your dedication to safety. Really, it's very noble. But this production has a professional effects team that has signed off on every single charge. Now, I suggest you go sit in your chair, hit your mark when you're called, and let the grown-ups handle the logistics." Wayne looked at him. Just looked at him. The kind of look that had stopped charging cavalries on screen and silenced barroom loudmouths in life. "Son," Wayne said softly, "you are about 10 seconds from making the worst mistake of your career." Vance's smile hardened. "Is that a threat?" "That'll be the day." Vance snorted. He turned to Elias. "Roll the cameras. Now." Elias, broken, raised his megaphone with a trembling hand. "All departments, stand by. Stunt team, to first positions." From the head of the canyon, Billy Ray waved. He was 24 years old, lean and sunburned, sitting atop a chestnut quarter horse with the easy confidence of youth. He didn't know that the ground he was about to ride over was salted with charges that could detonate at any second, in any order, with twice the force they were supposed to carry. Wayne saw the boy wave, and something shifted behind his eyes. Something old and implacable. He turned and walked, not toward his chair, not toward the camera, but toward the horse line. He moved with that famous rolling gait, but faster now, with purpose. The wrangler saw him coming and started to say something, but Wayne was already swinging up into the saddle of a big roan gelding, gathering the reins in one fist. "Duke, what the hell?" the wrangler started. Wayne didn't answer. He wheeled the horse and spurred it forward. "Roll camera," Vance shouted. "Action," Elias called, his voice cracking. Billy Ray kicked his horse into a gallop. The canyon walls rose on either side of him, and the first charge blew, a geyser of orange flame and black smoke erupting from the canyon floor 20 feet to his left. Then the second, to his right. Billy whooped, leaning low over the horse's neck, riding hard through the choreographed chaos. But Wayne saw what Billy couldn't see. 30 yards ahead, at the narrowest point of the canyon, the ground was bulging slightly. A charge was cooking off underground. The heat of the sun, the unstable chemicals, something had triggered it early. It was going to blow not beside the rider, but directly under him. Wayne drove his heels into the roan's flanks. The big horse surged forward like a locomotive, hooves pounding the hard pan, and Wayne rode the way he'd ridden in 100 pictures. Except this time, there was no stunt double, no safety wire, no second take. He came thundering up the canyon at an angle, closing the distance between himself and Billy Ray with terrifying speed. Billy saw him coming, and his eyes went wide. "Mr. Wayne, what are you?" Wayne reached out with one long arm, grabbed a fistful of Billy's shirt collar, and hauled the young man bodily off his horse. It was an impossible move, a 60-year-old man in a full gallop, deadlifting 170 pounds of stuntman with one arm. But Wayne had been doing impossible things on camera for 30 years, and his body remembered what his age tried to forget. They hit the ground together, Wayne twisting to take the impact on his shoulder, rolling Billy beneath him, shielding the younger man's body with his own. The ground exploded. The charge detonated with a roar that shook the canyon walls and sent a column of fire 40 feet into the air, 3, maybe 4 times the force of a properly rated stunt charge. Rock and debris rained down around them. The blast wave hit Wayne's back like a giant's fist, driving the air from his lungs. Then silence. Ringing, awful silence. Wayne lifted his head. Dirt fell from the brim of his hat. His ears were singing. He looked down at Billy Ray, who was staring up at him with the blank, stunned expression of a man who had just been snatched from the jaws of death by a living legend. "You all right, son?" Wayne asked. Billy opened his mouth, closed it, nodded. Wayne pushed himself to his feet, slowly, painfully. His shoulder screamed. His back felt like it had been worked over with a 2x4. He was too old for this, and he knew it, and he didn't care. He looked toward the crew. They were standing in a ragged line at the mouth of the canyon, frozen, staring. Elias had dropped his megaphone. The cameraman had stopped rolling. Even the horses at the picket line were silent. And Arthur Vance was standing behind his blast barrier, his face the color of old milk. Wayne walked out of that canyon with dust on his shoulders and blood on his knuckle, where he'd scraped it on the rocks. He walked past the silent crew, past the medics running toward Billy Ray with a stretcher he wouldn't need, past the grips and the gaffers and the extras who parted before him without being asked. He walked straight to Arthur Vance. Vance took a step backward, then another. His back hit the blast barrier, and he had nowhere else to go. Wayne stopped 2 feet in front of him, close enough that Vance could see every line in his weathered face, every speck of canyon dust in his eyebrows, every cold degree of the fury in his blue eyes. "Ladies and gentlemen," Wayne said, and his voice carried across the silent set with the effortless projection of a man who'd been filling movie theaters for 3 decades. "I want you all to take a good look at this man." He didn't point. He didn't need to. "This man," Wayne continued, "has been buying cut-rate explosives from a black market outfit in Barstow. Military surplus. Unstable. Condemned. The kind of ordnance the United States Army won't use because it's too dangerous for a war zone. He's been billing the studio full price and pocketing the difference." A murmur rippled through the crew. Wayne let it run its course. 2 years ago, one of those charges went off early on the set of this studio's last picture. A man named Tommy Miller. A man some of you worked with. A man who spent 20 years breaking his bones so the rest of us could look good on screen, threw himself between that explosion and a group of young extras. He saved their lives. It cost him his leg. The murmur grew louder. Angrier. Last night, this man fired Tommy Miller, called him redundant overhead, canceled his medical insurance, walked him off the lot like a dog. Wayne paused. And today, this man nearly killed Billy Ray with the same cheap garbage that crippled Tommy. He turned back to Vance. The producer's mouth was working, but no sound was coming out. His gold pinky ring caught the light as his hands trembled. You, you can't prove any of this, Vance finally managed. This is slander. I'll have my lawyers. Wayne reached into his jacket and produced the metal box Shorty had given him. He held it up so the crew could see it. Then, with a slow, underhand toss, he lobbed it toward the open stretch of desert beyond the parking area. The box hit the ground, bounced once, and detonated. The explosion split the air like a thunderclap. A fireball bloomed against the desert floor, kicking up a mushroom cloud of sand and smoke that rose 30 feet before the wind caught it. The shock wave rattled the windows of every trailer on the lot. 3-car alarms went off simultaneously. The crew stared at the smoking crater. Then they stared at Vance. That, Wayne said into the ringing silence, was a single stunt charge, rated for a flashbang effect at 12 feet, supposed to make a pretty spark and a little noise. He let the words hang. There are 11 more just like it buried in that canyon where Billy Ray was riding, where any one of you could have been standing. The silence broke like a dam. Voices erupted, shouting, cursing, accusation. The effects supervisor, Vance's hand-picked man, was already backing toward his truck. 2 Teamsters moved to block his path. Vance made a break for it. He lunged sideways, trying to dart around Wayne toward his trailer, but Wayne's hand shot out and caught him by the lapel of his pressed suit jacket. Not a punch. Wayne didn't punch defenseless men. Just a grip. Firm, immovable. The grip of a hand that had been swinging axes and pulling reins since before the talkies. Let go of me, Vance hissed. I'll have you blacklisted. I'll make sure you never work in this town again. I know people. I know people who. Pilgrim, Wayne said, and his voice was almost gentle now, the way a man's voice gets gentle when the storm has passed and the wreckage is clear. You don't know anybody. Not anymore. He released Vance's lapel and smoothed the fabric with a pat that was almost paternal, almost mocking. Then he leaned down, way down, until his face was level with Vance's, and spoke so quietly that only Vance could hear. You're going to get in your car. You're going to drive back to whatever rock you crawled out from under. And you are never going to set foot on a movie lot again. Because if you do, I won't be the one who comes for you. It'll be every grip, every gaffer, every wrangler and stuntman in this industry. And they won't be as polite as I am. He straightened up. Vance stood there for a moment, his suit rumpled, his hair askew, his face cycling through rage and fear, and finally, settling on something that looked, for the first time, like understanding. The understanding that comes to a bully when the playground turns against him. He turned and walked to his rented Cadillac. Nobody stopped him. Nobody said a word. They just watched, 100 men and women standing in the desert sun, as Arthur Vance drove away in a cloud of dust that the wind erased in seconds, as if the desert itself wanted to forget he'd ever been there. Wayne watched the dust settle. Then he took off his hat, wiped his brow with his sleeve, and put it back on. Elias, he called. The director materialized at his side, blinking, shell-shocked. Yes, Duke. Call the studio. Tell them what happened. Tell them we need Holloway effects back on the job by tomorrow morning. And we need a new line producer who knows the difference between a budget and a body count. Yes, Duke. And Elias? Yes. You did good work on this picture. The compositions, the performances, they're first-rate. Don't let men like Vance make you forget what you're worth. Elias stared at him. His eyes were bright behind his wire-rimmed glasses. He nodded once, sharply, and walked away with something that looked remarkably like a spine. The call was made. The studio sent investigators that same evening, accountants and lawyers who descended on Vance's trailer like vultures on a carcass. They found everything. The fake invoices, the shell company records, the kickback payments routed through 3 different banks. They found that Consolidated Pyrotechnics was owned by Vance's brother-in-law, a detail that surprised exactly no one. Vance was arrested at his hotel in Flagstaff 2 days later, still wearing his gold pinky ring, which the booking officer made him remove before photographing his hands. The studio settled with Tommy Miller quietly but generously. Full back pay, full medical coverage, not just the remaining surgeries, but physical therapy, a pension, and a newly created position. Chief Safety Consultant, reporting directly to the director, with authority to halt any stunt he deemed unsafe. It was a position that hadn't existed in Hollywood before. It would become standard within a decade. Billy Ray finished the picture. He did his own stunts for another 15 years, and every time a young rider asked him for advice, he told the same story. The day John Wayne rode through a canyon full of bad charges to pull him off a horse at full gallop. The story grew in the telling, as stories do, but the core of it never changed. The Duke came when it mattered. It was 3 days later, golden hour, and the set was winding down for the evening. The light was doing that thing it does in the desert, turning everything to amber and rose, making even the scrub brush look like something worth painting. Tommy Miller was standing by the horse corral, leaning on his cane, watching the sun go down. His bad leg ached, the way it always ached at the end of the day, but there was something in his face that hadn't been there a week ago, something that looked like peace. He heard the footsteps behind him, that distinctive, unhurried cadence. He didn't turn around. "Heard you start Monday," Wayne said, coming up beside him and resting his arms on the top rail of the corral fence. "That's what they tell me," Tommy said. "Chief safety consultant. Got a desk and everything. Even got a nameplate. Thomas the First, Miller. Imagine that. The I still stand for iron." Tommy laughed. It was a good laugh, rusty from disuse but honest. "It does." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the horses move in the fading light. A hawk circled overhead, riding the thermals in slow, lazy spirals. "Duke," Tommy said finally, "I don't know how to what you did. I mean." He stopped. He wasn't a man who found words easy, and these particular words were harder than most. Wayne squinted at the horizon. The sun was balanced on the edge of the mesa, a perfect burning disk, and the shadows stretched out behind them like dark roads leading back to everywhere they'd been. "Tommy," he said, "you threw yourself in front of an explosion to save a bunch of kids you'd never met. You lost your leg doing it. And then some pencil pusher in a fancy suit tried to throw you away for it." He paused. "That's not how the West works. Not the real one, and not ours." He pushed himself off the fence, turned, and walked toward the horse line where a wrangler had his roans saddled and waiting. He swung up into the saddle, stiffly, because his shoulders still ached from the canyon, but he'd die before he let it show, and gathered the reins. Tommy watched him. "Where are you headed?" Wayne settled his hat, pulling the brim low against the last of the light. He looked down at Tommy from the saddle, and for just a moment, the mask slipped, the stone face softened, and there was warmth there, real warmth, the kind he kept buried so deep that most people never saw it. "Just making sure the trail is clear, Tommy." He touched the brim of his Stetson in a two-fingered salute. "See you around." He turned the horse and rode west, straight into the dying sun, his silhouette growing smaller against that vast and burning sky until he was just a dark shape on the horizon, and then just a memory, and then just the kind of story men tell around campfires when they want to remember that some things in this world are still worth fighting for.